Have you ever noticed that some people don't enter the room, they arrive? They don't speak much, they don't demand attention, and yet every eye subtly follows them. They are not loud, but they are loud in presence. Not flashy, but something about them stays with you. This is silent attraction. It isn't the domain of models, influencers, or smooth-talking charmers. It lives in the quiet strength of those who have nothing to prove, and yet prove everything by the way they exist. It's not about standing out. It's about standing firm, not to be seen, but to be felt. And here's the paradox. True attraction doesn't shout, it whispers, not with volume, but with depth. In a world obsessed with being seen, being known, being validated, there is power in not needing any of it. There is power in those who walk their path without broadcasting their every step, and that is magnetic. Today, you'll learn not a gimmick, not a trick, but a way of being, carved from Stoic philosophy, sharpened by lived wisdom, and forged in the fire of stillness. Let's begin with the most quietly powerful of all habits. Habit 1. Be whole before you're heard. Real independence doesn't mean pushing people away. It means you've stopped chasing permission to exist. It's not rebellion. It's not arrogance. It's peace. A person who lives by their own values, who no longer asks the world, "Am I enough?" That person is impossible to ignore. They no longer need the world's applause. And that's exactly why the world watches them. Because we are drawn not to noise, but to centeredness. To those who know who they are, who need no mask, no approval, who are simply enough. In the words of Epictetus, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. And what's more outside your control than other people's opinions? To be silently attractive is to have reached a place within yourself where you no longer need anything to be noticed, because you are finally at home in your own skin. Habit 2. Grace. Without words, there is something captivating about poise. That rare energy that walks into a room without announcing itself, yet shifts the atmosphere. It's called silent elegance, and it's made not of words but of rhythm. The calm pace, the grounded stance, the unhurried eye contact of someone who sees but does not seek to be seen. Elegance is restraint. It's knowing that your presence can be louder than your voice, that the way you listen, the way you move, the way you exist, already says enough. In a world full of performers, be the one who is present. This isn't about being fancy. It's about being intentional. You don't need to dominate. Just be grounded. And in that groundedness, you become undeniable. Habit 3. Leave a trace, not a trail scent. The most primal of all memories. Not overpowering, not desperate, but the trace of someone who lives with care. Subtle scent is the art of saying without speaking, "I respect myself." And that is rare. It's not about impressing, it's about alignment. From the hygiene you maintain, to the way you choose your signature fragrance, you're communicating how deeply you notice the details. Because if you care about what's invisible, then maybe you also care about what's real. That's why the Stoic Seneca once said, "Let your outer appearance be simple and dignified, reflecting the serenity of your mind. Let the fragrance you wear be your silence in bloom." Habit 4. Be here in the noise of the modern world. Attention is a superpower. And presence, real, full, focused presence, is one of the rarest gifts you can offer. Because when you look someone in the eye and actually listen, you do more than hear them, you hold them. In that moment, you become unforgettable. People aren't starving for words, they're starving for connection. So if you can be the one who's not always thinking of what to say next, but instead is still enough to feel, you become the oasis in the noise. You become magnetic. Marcus Aurelius said, "Confine yourself to the present." Because the present moment is the only place power exists. When you live there, people notice. You don't need attention. You give it. And that's what makes people come back. Habit 5. Leave something unsaid in a world addicted to exposure. Mystery is rebellion, and rebellion is attractive. It's not about secrets, it's about selectivity. You don't need to explain everything. Your actions, your silence, your energy already say enough. Let them wonder a little. Let them earn access to your depths. Because the more people think they know you completely, the less they pay attention. But when you reveal yourself slowly, layer by layer, you become timeless. As Epictetus advised, be silent or let your words be worth more than silence. Silence becomes your most eloquent trait. Habit 6. Expand without shouting. There's a different kind of power in someone who knows the world, not because they want to impress, but because they listen to it. This is cultural wisdom, not trivia, not pretension, but the quiet glow of someone who's walked through many stories, read between the lines, and carries a map of humanity in their mind. They don't need to prove they're smart. You feel it in the way they pause, the questions they ask, the subtle way they shift the conversation to include, not exclude. They've learned how to hold space, not just for themselves, but for others. And that, in a time of shouting, is deeply attractive. Marcus Aurelius said, "Look beneath the surface. Let not the outward appearances mislead you. To be wise is to look deeper, to listen longer, to respond with less ego and more empathy. So be the one who carries stories, not just opinions. People won't remember what you've read, but they'll remember how you made them feel seen." Habit 7. Carry warmth. Like firelight, compassion doesn't raise its voice. It simply stays. While others are quick to advise, fix, or speak, the quietly attractive person listens and then lets people be. They don't perform kindness. They live it. They remember a name, a birthday, the way someone looked a little tired today, and they offer something rare, a presence that feels like rest. In a culture of highlight reels and self-promotion, true warmth is revolutionary. People don't always need your advice, but they never forget your presence. So be the calm voice when tempers flare. Be the steady hand when things shake. Be the person whose silence feels like safety. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others, strict with yourself." It's not softness, it's strength directed inward. Compassion isn't weakness, it's a quiet kind of courage. And when you walk with this kind of heart, you leave footprints, even in silence. Habit 8. Let joy be your echo. There's something irresistible about someone who laughs, not loudly, but freely. Not the forced kind of laughter, not the joke-a-minute personality trying too hard, but the smile that arrives like sunrise. Unexpected, gentle, undeniable. Joy isn't loud. Joy, it's alive. The person who finds joy even in hard times, who laughs at their own mistakes without shame, who sees the absurdity in life and still shows up, that person is radiant. Stoics were never opposed to joy. They just believed in joy that wasn't dependent on outcomes. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And sometimes the most defiant reaction is a smile. So laugh, not to entertain, but to show you're still alive and unshaken, that your joy comes from within, and that, in a heavy world, is a light everyone wants to follow. Habit 9. Quiet rituals of respect. Self-care isn't indulgence. It's integrity. The way you eat, the way you sleep, the way you say no to one more distraction, and yes to your inner rhythm. That's not selfish, that's sacred, because the person who cares for themselves quietly says, "I am worth the effort," not in words, not in declarations, but in the way they nourish their body, protect their energy, and honor their mind. When you meet someone who respects themselves, You feel it. There's a glow in their eyes, a steadiness in their voice, a refusal to be pulled into every storm. Seneca once said, "A sound mind in a sound body is a short, but full description of a happy state in this world." And that's the truth. Silent attraction often begins in solitude, in the gym, in the journal, in the quiet walk where you finally listen to your own thoughts. Take care of yourself not to impress, but because your soul deserves a well-maintained home. Habit 10. The emotional compass. There are people who walk into chaos and don't flinch because they've trained their hearts to remain steady. That's emotional intelligence, not reactive. Not cold, but aware. They see what others miss, they hear what others dismiss, and they move through conflict with a rare kind of grace. They don't just understand their own emotion, they know how to read the room, and in that understanding they earn trust without ever asking for it. Epictetus said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." Practice emotional awareness, and you become the anchor, the calm in the conversation, the one others instinctively look toward. It's not dramatic, it's disciplined, and it makes you unforgettable. Habit 11. The steady flame. In a world of flakes, ghosts, and vanishing acts, show up, be early, be steady, be someone whose words mean something, because when everyone else is rushing, pivoting, canceling, you become a lighthouse. Reliability isn't glamorous, but it's gold. It's in the friend who shows up, the partner who remembers, the stranger who actually does what they promised. You don't need to talk about your values. Live them every day. And people will feel it, even if they can't. Explain why. Marcus Aurelius said it best. Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. So be the one who's consistent, who doesn't waver with every emotion, who is calm, committed, and clear. You won't have to chase attraction. It will come to you, drawn by the quiet fire you carry. Closing. These aren't habits for show. They're habits for truth. They don't make you louder, they make you deeper. And that depth, that's what people remember. Not because you tried to be attractive, but because you became whole. You don't need to shout. You just need to become that silent attraction. There's a strange kind of power in those who are not trying to win you. They don't chase your approval, they don't decorate their lives for an audience. And somehow, you still find yourself watching them. This isn't charisma in the traditional sense. It's something older, more rooted, more real. It's presence born from alignment. Because when someone is truly at peace with themselves, they emanate it. It's not an act. It's not rehearsed. It's the residue of a person who's faced themselves and stopped running. And that's why silent attraction is so powerful. Because it isn't about performance. It's about truth. The absence that attracts in a world where everyone is adding more talking, more sharing, more reaching. The truly magnetic person is subtracting. They're refining. They don't rush to fill silence. They don't rush to be seen. They understand the sacred value of withholding, of letting the other person lean in, of letting the unknown be felt, not forced. Because what we chase runs, but what stands still, grounded whole, draws. There is a kind of elegance in not always being available. Not in playing games, but in honoring your time, your energy, your depth. And the more you withhold with intention, the more your presence begins to whisper something others can't ignore. You won't figure me out in one sitting. The texture of stillness. Stillness isn't inactivity. It's power under control. It's the person who listens more than they speak. Not because they lack thoughts, but because their thoughts are measured. They aren't eager to impress. They aren't hungry for attention. Because they're fed from within. Stillness is not stiffness. It's the ability to feel deeply without being moved easily. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. A quietly attractive person has gone there. They've entered that inner retreat and they've come back, unchanged by noise. That's why they're different, not because of what they wear, but because of what they carry inside. The voice that doesn't raise words are cheap. Energy is not. You don't need to speak more. You need to mean more. Most attractive people don't try to dominate conversation. They enter it with curiosity. They offer rather than impose. When they speak, it's with intention. When they pause, it's with power. Their words come from still water, not a rushing stream. And because of that, people listen, not because they demand it, but because they've earned it, with silence. In conversations, be the one who brings calm. Be the one who sees deeper. Not every room needs more talkers. It needs feelers. Self that doesn't perform, perhaps the rarest quality today, is sincerity, to not be curated, to not be performing authenticity, but actually living it. When you no longer need to create a version of yourself for every room, you start becoming powerful in every room. Because people can feel when they're meeting you, not a version designed to be liked. The person who is silently attractive doesn't just have self-esteem, they have self-knowledge. They've looked in the mirror and decided to stay. No mask, no exaggeration. Just a deep-rooted yes to who they are. And in a world where everyone's building an image, that kind of honesty is unforgettable. The aura that can't be taught. What's most magnetic about silently attractive people is not any one thing. It's the harmony of many subtle habits. Each small, each quiet, each consistent. They've trained their posture, their tone, their reactions, their rituals, their resilience. They walk into a space with nothing to prove. And that's exactly what proves everything. They don't beg for trust. They build it over time, with consistency, with depth, with kindness that doesn't shout but stays. They've become an energy, not just a personality, and energy is unforgettable. You don't find silent power, you build it. You may be wondering, can I learn this? Can I become this? The answer is yes, but not in a weekend, not in a hack, not with a course or a trend. You become silently attractive by becoming fully yourself. You build it in the lonely hours, in the quiet discipline, in the moments when you choose stillness over reaction, presence over performance, depth over attention. This isn't the easy path, it's the meaningful one. And when you walk it, people begin to feel something around you, even if they can't name it. It's the gravity of someone who no longer needs to be chased, seen, or applauded. They just are. And in that being, they become magnetic. A final whisper for today: don't rush to become noticeable. Instead, I become undeniable. That's the silent path, and those who walk it leave echoes, not noise. There are people who enter your life like fireworks, loud, bright, fleeting. And then there are those who enter like a steady flame. They don't need introductions. They don't crave applause. But somehow, their presence lingers, long after the moment is over. That is the power of being unshakable. And it is built, not born. The calm that commands. Imagine this. The world is spinning. People panic. Voices rise. And in the middle of it all, one person remains still. Not indifferent, not cold, but centered. That person becomes the emotional anchor. They don't need to shout. Their calmness says everything. This is not the kind of calm you fake. It's the kind you earn by wrestling your inner chaos until silence wins. Stoics revered this trait. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. So revoke it. Stop handing your peace to people. and events outside your control. Let your peace be your choice, and your presence will speak volumes. Rituals of the grounded soul. Silently attractive people don't just stumble into self-mastery. They create it daily. Through small sacred rituals no one sees. Waking early, sitting in silence. Exercising not for vanity, but for vitality. Reading not to impress, but to understand. They sharpen their minds like blades, not to harm, but to cut through noise. Their routines are not restrictive, they are liberating. Because the more grounded your daily life becomes, the more limitless your energy becomes. They have boundaries, not walls, but firm lines drawn from clarity, not fear, and that's the paradox. The person who guards their space carefully becomes the safest space for others. The beauty of restraint in a world of oversharing, overselling, overexposing. The person who restrains themselves becomes a mystery, not by being secretive, but by being selective. They don't speak unless their words add something. They don't react unless it's intentional. They don't perform because they have nothing to prove. This isn't coldness. This is power, refined. A silently attractive person doesn't tell you who they are. They show you, in micro decisions, in subtle moments. You won't find their worth in their words. You'll find it in their consistency. They're not everywhere, and that's why you feel it when they are. Boundaries are magnetic. The people who truly attract don't chase. They have time for others, yes. But they also protect their solitude like a temple. They say no without guilt. They don't explain every decision. They've stopped seeking permission to live a centered life. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. Because when you know your values and your schedule reflects it, your circle reflects it, your energy reflects it, you're no longer everywhere with everyone doing everything. You've become focused. And focus is profoundly attractive. Not because it isolates you, but because it refines you. You start showing up where you belong and disappearing where you don't. And that creates an aura people can feel before you speak a word. Speak less, mean more. There is immense power in being the one who doesn't talk all the time. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you've trained yourself to wait for the right moment. The right moment to ask a question that cuts through surface talk. The right moment to offer insight, not opinion. The right moment to listen when everyone else is trying to impress. You'll notice something interesting. The person who speaks last one often leaves the deepest impact because their words weren't a reflex, they were a choice. Don't fill space, hold space, and let your voice be a reflection of your clarity, not your need to be heard. The eyes, that witness, they don't just look, they see. Silently attractive people carry a gaze that goes beyond the surface. Their eyes say, I am here, I am listening, I notice. And that noticing, it's rare, because most people are too caught in their own noise to really see another. But when you meet someone who is truly present, whose eyes are soft but alert, you feel exposed and yet safe, understood, without words. That kind of gaze isn't learned in a book. It's born from stillness, from pain turned into patience, from introspection that taught them how to see themselves, and therefore to see you. Become someone they can feel. At the end of the day, the silently attractive person is not remembered for one moment. They're remembered for an aura, a steady, grounded energy that followed them. That stayed in the room. That left people asking, who was that? And the truth is, you don't need to be anyone else to become this person. You just need to return, fully, to yourself. Strip away the noise. Build the habits. Protect your peace. Sharpen your depth. Honor your word. Love in silence. Act with clarity. And one day, without trying, without asking, without forcing, you'll realize you don't need to chase attraction. You are it. Not all strength is visible. Some of it hides in silence. in how a person pauses instead of exploding, in how they walk away rather than escalate, in how they choose peace, even when war would be easier. This is the kind of strength that doesn't need muscles to be felt. It's not flexed, it's not flaunted, it's simply there, like a mountain. And the people who carry this kind of strength are some of the most silently attractive humans you'll ever meet, because they radiate something rare, emotional steadiness. The soul that doesn't shake easily. Imagine being the kind of person who doesn't flinch at gossip, who doesn't crumble at criticism, who doesn't need to clap back because their dignity is too expensive. That person exists. And they've built their life around one principle: control what you can, accept what you can't. Stoicism teaches this with fierce clarity. Epictetus said, "There's only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." The silently attractive person lives this. They've separated the noise from the truth. They've chosen stillness over spirals. They respond. They don't react. And that is power. When you no longer need to explain yourself, there comes a time in your life when you stop needing people to get it. You stop defending your values. Stop clarifying your choices. Stop apologizing for your evolution, not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. You realize, if someone misunderstands you, that's okay. If someone walks away, that's okay. If someone doesn't approve, that's okay. Because finally, you approve of yourself. And the moment you reach that level of detachment, you become unbothered, undistracted, unmistakably magnetic. Letting go is an art form. Silently attractive people know how to let go, not just of people, but of identities. They've shed versions of themselves that no longer fit. They've buried old habits with quiet reverence. They've released past expectations so that something new could be born. They don't hold on to roles out of fear. They evolve, softly, deliberately, without spectacle, and people notice. Because growth that doesn't scream shines. Change that doesn't beg for applause inspires. They've learned to walk away, not as punishment, but as preservation. And that kind of boundary, set in peace, creates gravity. The hidden habit of listening deeply. It's rare to be truly heard. Most people listen to respond, not to understand, but the silently attractive person listens differently. They're not just waiting for a pause to jump in. They're holding space. They're catching the subtext. They're feeling what you're not saying. They don't need to interrupt to feel important. Their silence becomes a mirror, a safe place where others unravel. And when they do speak, you listen, because they've earned your trust without demanding it. This kind of listening builds connection faster than charm ever could. The inner scoreboard. A person with silent power has stopped measuring their worth by outside metrics. Not followers, not likes, not validation, not salary, not status. They have an inner scoreboard. It tracks integrity. It tracks discipline. It tracks how often they've chosen the harder right over the easier wrong. This private metric is what keeps them rooted. It's why they can walk alone and not feel lonely. It's why they don't need to show off, and because they know when your identity is built internally, it cannot be shaken externally. That's why people feel drawn to them. There's no chase, no show, just substance. When kindness is no longer a strategy, we've all seen it. People who use kindness as a tactic, a way to be liked, accepted, praised. But the quietly attractive person doesn't do it for results. They do it because it's who they've become. Their kindness isn't conditional. It's not turned off when it's inconvenient. It's not erased when they're angry. It's consistent, even when no one's watching. That consistency is what earns them a reputation, not just as good, but as solid. And in a world full of performers, that kind of authentic kindness, it becomes unforgettable. The strength to not need to. When they don't need the last word, They don't need to outshine, they don't need to be right every time. They've learned the art of surrender, not to weakness, but to wisdom. And that wisdom whispers, not every battle is worth fighting. Not every opinion needs a response. Not every conflict is an invitation. Sometimes, silence is the victory. And those who understand this walk away from chaos like kings, not because they're above it, but because they've outgrown it. The secret language of the balanced life. There's an energy to someone who's aligned. Their sleep is sacred. Their mornings are intentional. Their relationships are chosen, not filled out of fear of being alone. They have a rhythm, a personal frequency. You feel it when you're around them. They don't rush. They don't beg. They don't scatter. Their energy across the noise. Their day is shaped by choices, not impulses. And every choice adds to their quiet power. That's not luck. That's lifestyle. And when you meet someone living like that, you can't help but want to match their frequency. You've seen it. People who shine so bright that they burn out. They glow for attention, not alignment. And eventually, the flame eats itself. But then there are others whose light is different, softer, steady, enduring. They don't chase the spotlight. They carry their own. And that's what this part is about. The kind of presence that illuminates quietly, without ever needing to blaze. The glow of discipline, you can feel it when someone has trained themselves. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't negotiate with laziness, who doesn't romanticize excuses, who shows up not for applause, but because they said they would. Discipline, when internalized, radiates. It's not militant, it's centered. It's waking up early without the world knowing. It's turning off the phone when you need clarity. It's choosing solitude over distraction, again and again. Stoics lived this. Seneca said, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that they are difficult." The silently attractive person dares, quietly, and because of that, they become unstoppable, without ever needing to announce it. The quiet impact of emotional neutrality. There's a power that comes from not reacting, from letting things pass, from not letting small offenses become emotional wars. It doesn't mean you're passive. It means you've become so internally stable that your peace is not at the mercy of petty energy. This is emotional neutrality, not apathy, but clarity without turbulence. It's the person who receives an insult and smiles because they see where it's coming from and they choose not to participate. It's the person who walks through a storm and instead of cursing the wind, adjusts their steps. And people feel it, because that kind of self-control is rare, and rare is unforgettable. When confidence comes from congruence, true confidence doesn't look like bravado. It looks like congruence. When your actions match your values, when your words match your energy, when your inner life matches your outer life, you don't need to appear confident. You simply are, because nothing is out of sync. Silently attractive people aren't trying to convince anyone of who they are. They've become it. And that kind of consistency, across thoughts, behavior, and intention, creates an aura. People can't quite put it into words, but they trust you. They feel safe, because there's no mask. Only presence, only congruence, only truth. Solitude as sanctuary. Not everyone who is alone is lonely, and not everyone who is surrounded is fulfilled. Silently attractive people don't fear solitude. They seek it. Because in solitude they recharge, they reflect, they realign. They've stopped needing constant validation. They've stopped needing to always be in touch. Because they've fallen in love with their own company. This is not detachment. This is depth. The deeper you go into yourself, the less noise you need from the world. That's why they walk differently, talk differently, carry themselves with a kind of quiet sovereignty. They don't need to prove anything, because they've already proven it to the one person that matters, themselves. The power of slowness. The world moves fast. Everyone is rushing, scrolling, swiping, and deciding, escaping. But the person who moves slowly, intentionally, fully present, they stand out like a monk in a marketplace. They eat slower, speak slower, listen longer, respond with intention. This isn't laziness, it's consciousness. And in a hyper-distracted world, it is magnetic, because people crave presence, and presence cannot be rushed. So if you want to attract without trying, learn to slow down, because the more still you become, the more the world starts moving around you. Maturity, without the need to be right. They don't correct others just to feel smart. They don't argue every point. They don't chase victory in every conversation, because they've learned being right means nothing if it costs peace. That doesn't mean they're weak, it means they're wise. They've let go of ego, of the need to win every exchange. And in that letting go, because the person who doesn't need to dominate the room often ends up owning it, quietly. Energy is the new status symbol. Forget status. Forget credentials, forget flashy brands or big declarations. Today, what people are really drawn to in waiter setting is energy. Not manic, not performative, but calm, clear, grounded. Silently attractive people walk in, and the air changes. Not because they took up space, but because they stabilized it. Their energy says, I've done the work. I don't need attention. I bring peace, not pressure. And that, in any room at any level, is the most powerful kind of entrance. Elegance in the everyday. You don't need wealth to be elegant. You don't need luxury to walk with dignity. True elegance is found in the little things. How you greet someone, how you say thank you, how you respond to delay, how you carry yourself when no one's watching. It's not about being perfect. It's about being intentional. Silently attractive people move with a kind of grace that doesn't demand notice, but always receives it. Because elegance is not for show, it's a personal code, and those who live by it leave lasting impressions without trying to. You can't fake it. That feeling when someone walks into a room, and even without speaking, something shifts. The air thickens. Time slows. Not because they try, but because they are. This is not charisma. It's not charm. It's not a social skill. It's something deeper, more ancient. Something that can't be taught, only earned. It's the still fire within. The gravity of self-containment. Some people are like open circuits, plugged into everything, reacting to everything, depleted by everything. But then there are those who are self-contained. They carry their own weather, their own light, their own answers. They don't need to borrow presence from noise, status, or crowd approval. Because their presence comes from within. They don't overflow. They don't scatter. They don't bleed emotionally in public. Their boundaries are invisible, but undeniable. And that restraint is attractive, because it says, I am responsible for my energy. And in a world of projections, that kind of ownership feels like relief. The strength to stay soft. It's easy to harden, to become cynical, to armor up, but it takes real strength to stay soft in a harsh world, to still offer kindness when it's not returned, to still believe in connection, even when you've been hurt, to still lead with empathy, not because it's safe, but because it's who you are. Silently attractive people are not emotionally numb. They feel deeply, but they don't make others responsible for that feeling. They've mastered the rarest balance: open heart, clear mind, grounded body, and people feel it. Because they don't weaponize their wounds, they transmute them. Humility that doesn't diminish. There's something magnetic about someone who's clearly capable and yet never boastful. Someone who has power but doesn't flaunt it. Knowledge but never condescends. Success but still listens like a student. That's real humility. It doesn't say I'm less than, it says I don't need to prove I'm more. Stoic humility is not self-erasure. It's self-possession. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote nightly reminders to stay small, to avoid vanity, to remember his role in the cosmos. And if the most powerful man in the ancient world could write, you could leave life right. Now, let that determine what you do and say and think. Then surely we too can trade arrogance for awe. Silently attractive people carry that awe. They move through the world with reverence, not entitlement. The intelligence of observation. Every strength is loud. Not every leader commands with voice. Some lead by watching, by noticing what's unsaid, by seeing what others miss, by reading the room before entering it emotionally. This is social intelligence, and it's a kind of quiet genius, because while others are rushing to be heard, these people are hearing everything. They're watching body language, sensing tone, shifts, picking up on discomfort, needs, tension, and silence. They're not waiting to speak, they're absorbing. And when they finally do speak, what they say lands like truth, not because it's loud, but because it's accurate. That's the secret. Accuracy is always more attractive than volume. Holding your emotional line. Ever seen someone lose control over something small? They raise their voice, they lash out, they unravel publicly. It's common, understandable, but not magnetic. Now imagine someone else who's insulted and doesn't flinch, rejected and doesn't spiral, ignored and doesn't beg. That person is operating on a higher level. Because they've cultivated emotional containment, they don't spill, they don't flood, they contain, not by suppression, but by sublimation. They feel it and channel it. Anger becomes boundaries. Sadness becomes reflection. Fear becomes awareness. And that kind of transformation, it creates an energy that others instinctively trust. The kind of confidence that makes others breathe easier. Some confidence is loud. It brags. It puffs up. It walks in as if to say, see? Me. Validate me. But silent confidence doesn't need the room. It holds the room, because it's rooted in something deeper than image. It's built on consistency, resilience, self-respect, quiet knowing, and that knowing creates safety. People relax around it because they don't feel judged, they feel seen, they don't feel compared, they feel calmed. That's the secret. The most attractive people aren't the ones who demand attention, but the ones whose presence makes you feel at peace with yourself. Depth over display in a world addicted to showmanship. The person who chooses depth instead of display becomes unforgettable. They may not have 1 million followers, they may not dominate every room, but when they speak, they carry weight, not because they try to be deep, but because they've lived deeply. They've suffered, sat with their shadows, held pain without numbing, challenged their ego, asked hard questions, and waited in silence for the answers. And all of that depth comes through in the way they pause, in the way they choose words with care, in the way their eyes hold memory. This isn't learned, it's earned, and it makes them magnetic, not because they shine, but because they reflect. Still water runs deep. You've heard the saying. But when you meet someone who lives it, who walks through life not seeking waves but carrying depth, you realize this is not a metaphor, it's a presence. They are calm, but not empty. Quiet, but not absent. Subtle, but unforgettable. This is the essence of silent attraction. To say little, but mean much. To do little, but move many. To be still, and yet leave ripples everywhere you go. When presence speaks louder than words, you don't need to speak first. You don't need to speak most. You just need to be there, fully. Silently attractive people have mastered the art of presence. They're not distracted. They're not fidgeting. They're not glancing at their phone while you talk. They are with you, and that in today's fractured world is rare. Their stillness becomes a mirror. You see yourself more clearly in their presence, and that's why people gravitate toward them, not for entertainment, but for clarity. Letting silence breathe. They don't rush to fill silences, because they know. Not all silence is awkward. Some silence is sacred. It's where thoughts land, where truth surface, where connection deepens. While others rush to impress, the silently magnetic person pauses. They let the conversation exhale. They give room for meaning to rise. This kind of silence isn't empty. It's pregnant with presence. And the person who can hold that space, without anxiety, without ego, becomes unforgettable. Being unavailable in the right way. They're not always online, not always accessible, not always on call for the world's noise. And that's not arrogance, it's protection, because they know their energy isn't infinite, and what's rare must be preserved. So they don't respond instantly. They don't say yes automatically. They don't give away access without intention. That distance, that subtle detachment, doesn't push people away. It pulls them in. Because what is hard to reach becomes more valued, and what is quiet becomes listened to more carefully. Clarity as a lifestyle. Silently attractive people live with clarity. Not confusion, not clutter, not contradiction. They don't say one thing and do another. They don't carry hidden motives. They don't shift personas for convenience. What they say, they mean. Where they go, they choose. Who they love, they respect. That kind of clarity, of intention, direction, and expression, creates trust. You may not always understand them, but you believe them, because clarity is honesty. And honesty, without noise, is a light in the dark, unshakable. Without being unreachable, they don't crumble under pressure. But they're not stone. They feel, they care. They're emotionally alive, but emotionally owned. You can sense their discipline, not in how rigid they are, but in how free they've become. They don't react to chaos, they observe it. They don't match drama, they lower it, because they've built a fortress within. Not walls to keep people out, but foundations to keep themselves in. So when you meet them, you feel safe, not just emotionally, but energetically, because you know this person doesn't shift with the wind. They are the ground beneath it, the wisdom of living unapologetically. They're not loud about who they are, but they never apologize for it either. They've stopped shrinking, stopped editing themselves, stopped translating their authenticity into a more acceptable dialect, not to provoke, not to rebel, but simply to be. They've dropped the performance, and in its place stands truth. And when truth walks into a room, people feel it. It doesn't beg, it doesn't seduce, it simply radiates. Because when you are unapologetically you give others permission to return to themselves, and that is more attractive than anything else. Living with less, feeling more. They don't chase more. More noise, more fame, more followers. They chase essence. Their life is lean, not in lack, but in clarity. Their space is intentional. Their schedule unbloated. Their relationships deep, not wide, because they know. You don't need more to feel full. You need to feel aligned. And when someone lives like that, their very existence becomes a breath of fresh air. You feel them, like a clearing, like stillness after a storm. They've chosen depth, and it shows in the way they walk, speak, connect, and depart. Some people say a lot and say nothing. Others speak rarely, but every word lands because their life is their message. Their actions are their voice, their habits, their philosophy, and their presence, a quiet statement that whispers, "This is who I am," not loud, not performed, just lived. The art of invisible leadership. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a mic, a stage, or a crowd. You don't need to be called a leader to become one. Because some of the most quietly attractive people lead without trying. They model integrity. They model boundaries. They model presence. They don't tell you what to do. They show you in the way they carry themselves through conflict, pressure, and praise. And that's what makes them magnetic. They aren't pointing the way. They are the way. People don't follow them because they're loud. They follow them because they're clear. And in a world of confusion, clarity leads. The respect that doesn't need to be demanded. You've probably seen it. People who chase respect and through dominance, volume, aggression. But silently magnetic people don't demand respect, they command it by how they live. They keep promises, not just to others, but to themselves. They're consistent, not for image, but for alignment. You don't respect them because they intimidate you. You respect them because they inspire you, and that's the difference. Fear fades, but earned respect, that stays. Decisions. Without debate, they don't need to explain every move. They're not asking the crowd, does this make sense? Do you agree? Am I valid? No. They move in silence. Not recklessly, but intuitively. They've done the internal work. They've examined their values. They've built a compass. And now, they follow it. Not every decision is visible. Not every step is announced. But each one is aligned, and that quiet, unshakable direction, it makes them impossible to ignore, because we live in a world of wanderers. And when someone walks like they know, you notice. Subtle confidence, the opposite of performance. There's a type of confidence that doesn't look like what you expect. No overcompensation, no bravado, no constant validation seeking. Just ease. They're comfortable in their skin. They're at home in their own presence. They don't need to charm you. They're not trying to win the room because the room isn't a contest. It's just a place to be. This confidence doesn't overpower. It holds. It creates space, not tension. And that space, that's where real connection happens. Self-trust. That feels like gravity. They don't second-guess their intuition. They don't outsource their truth. They don't wait for consensus before moving. They've learned to trust themselves. Not blindly, but because they've earned it. Through thousands of quiet, consistent, invisible choices. They've shown up for themselves when no one else did. And in doing so, they built a relationship with their own mind. That relationship, that's what gives them weight. They're not heavy with need, they're heavy with knowing. And when someone walks in with that kind of gravity, the room slows down. Not because of what they're wearing, not because of what they say, but because of what they carry inside. The discipline of letting go. They don't cling to roles, to opinions, to people, to the need to be right. They're not addicted to being understood. They don't require agreement to feel whole, because their peace is not built on external consensus. It's built on internal congruence. They know when to leave, when to stay, when to detach, when to release. And that release, that restraint, that letting go without needing drama, it makes them magnetic, because the person who doesn't need to hold on is the one others reach for. Energy that listens. Before it speaks, they don't walk in and demand the room adjust to them. They adjust to the room without losing themselves. They observe, they listen, they feel, and only then do they speak. Their words are placed, not spilled. Their tone, measured. Their intention, clear. They don't dominate the energy. They tune into it. And by doing so, they create harmony. This is energetic empathy. And it's more powerful than charisma. Because it doesn't say, look at me, it says, I see you. There are people who make an impact before they say a word, before they smile, before they sit, before they move. You feel them, not through what they project, but through what they've cultivated. It's not charm, it's not force, it's Not performance, it's soul, grounded, still, fully inhabited. They don't enter to take space. They enter already whole, and that wholeness does the speaking, the intensity of stillness. Most people confuse intensity with speed, with fire, with noise, with showing more. But true intensity? It's not loud. It's precise. It's the power in a glance that lands like thunder. The power in silence that speaks louder than applause. Stillness is not weakness. It's controlled power. It's the person who doesn't flinch, not because they feel nothing, but because they've owned everything. Stillness is presence stripped of performance, and when someone walks into a room with that, the entire frequency shifts. Letting meaning replace momentum, you don't always have to be moving to be progressing. Some people chase motion. They mistake busy for becoming. But the silently attractive person doesn't rush. They know how to pause, to realign, to check in. They've learned that the right step taken deliberately is more powerful than 100 steps taken impulsively. They value depth over distance. They may not be everywhere, but when they show up, they're fully there, and that presence, it lingers far beyond their exit. Grace in emotional extremes. When they're praised, they don't inflate. When they're criticized, they don't shrink. When they're provoked, they don't snap. They carry the kind of emotional range that doesn't swing wildly. It flows quietly and like an underground river. They've mastered the art of self-regulation, not suppression, not denial, but deep, internal clarity. So while others are consumed by highs and lows, they remain steady. And that steadiness becomes magnetic. Because in a world of emotional volatility, their restraint feels like sanity, selective vulnerability. They don't spill everything. They don't confess for sympathy. They don't expose themselves for connection. But when they do open up, it's intentional, precise, real. They know what parts of themselves are sacred. They don't offer them to just anyone. And that's what makes them feel so valuable when they do. Their vulnerability is not an act, it's not a manipulation. It's a rare door, quietly opened. And once you've stepped through it, you feel trusted, seen, respected. That kind of selective truth-telling builds a bond deeper than charisma ever could. When peace becomes power, they're not fighting for control. They're not wrestling for relevance. They're not exhausting themselves in battles that don't matter because they found peace, and they've decided to protect it like treasure. That peace didn't come cheap. It came from years of self-questioning, of burning away illusions, of releasing what no longer served. So now, when chaos knocks, they don't answer. When drama rises, they don't escalate. When manipulation whispers, they smile and walk away. And in doing so, they rise above without saying a word. Sacred self-respect. Silently attractive people treat themselves like something sacred, not in ego, but in reverence. They don't tolerate what drains them. They don't negotiate their worth. They don't give energy to spaces that don't honor their truth. Their self-respect is not loud, it's stable. It doesn't ask for recognition. It simply exists, like gravity, like a line that cannot be crossed. And the more they respect themselves, the more others do too. Not because they demanded it, but because they modeled it. And modeling always speaks louder than messaging. Elegance without excess. Their style isn't flamboyant, it's intentional. Their choices aren't trendy, they're timeless. They've learned that elegance isn't about more. It's about refinement. Whether it's how they dress, how they move, or how they speak, every detail carries purpose. There's a softness in their voice, a precision in their words, a subtlety in their appearance, and all of it says, I care, not for approval, but for alignment. Because when your outer world reflects your inner values, you become irresistible without ever raising your volume. There's a blueprint behind true attraction, but it's not in your face, it's not loud, not viral, not decorative. It's built in the shadows, in solitude, in integrity when no one's watching, In choices no one applauds. Silently magnetic, people don't decorate their surface, they fortify their foundation. And that foundation? It's made of small, consistent, unseen habits that compound into something rare. Presence. The integrity no one sees. They don't post every act of kindness. They don't announce every time they did the right thing, because for them, integrity isn't performance, it's home. They're honest when it's inconvenient, kind when it's not rewarded, consistent when no one's clapping. That invisible track record of inner alignment and moral clarity creates a resonance. You don't need to know what they've done, you just feel it when you meet them, because energy always tells the truth. Restraint as refinement. In a world obsessed with saying more, doing more, showing more, they pull back. Not to be mysterious, but because they know power doesn't push. It waits. It withholds. It lets others reveal themselves, and while it watches, listens, and chooses, they don't speak on everything. They don't chase every opportunity. They don't comment on every issue, because they're refined, filtered, focused. And in that restraint, they radiate something precious, presence without pressure. The consistency that becomes aura. They're not impressive because of what they do once. They're impressive because of what they repeat, quietly, daily, relentlessly. Their aura wasn't built in moments, it was built in patterns. They showed up for their routines, held their boundaries, protected their energy, chose growth when no one clapped. And now, you can feel it in the way they walk, the way they listen, the way they sit still when others panic. Consistency becomes charisma, not the kind that performs, but the kind that grounds everyone in the room. Living the message, not selling it. You won't find them shouting their values. They live them. They're not evangelists for self-worth, they embody it. They're not quoting stoicism for likes. They're practicing it when it's hard. And that's what makes them unforgettable. Not that they spoke the loudest, but that they lived the deepest. Their life isn't a pitch, it's a poem. And each habit, each gesture, each boundary, a stanza in that quiet masterpiece. The soft power of non-reaction. You'll notice it when they're challenged. They don't get defensive, don't crumble, don't retaliate. They observe, they hear the insult, and respond with clarity, not venom. They see the provocation and choose silence, not escalation. Why? Because they've mastered their nervous system. They've taught their body not to react to everything loud. They've trained their soul not to bow to every emotion, and in that stillness, they become undeniable. Because there's nothing louder than someone who refuses to flinch. Peace that doesn't need a stage. They're not broadcasting their healing. They're not marketing their inner peace, but spend 5 minutes with them, and you feel it. You feel the lack of tension, the softness in their tone, the depth in their gaze, the calm in their pacing. They've made peace with their past. They've made space in their present. And they walk toward the future, not anxiously, but intentionally. That kind of peace, it's not something you show, it's something you are. And people remember that, long after they've forgotten your name. The final filter, self-respect. This is what ties it all together. Everything they do, how they dress, speak, eat, respond, connect, is filtered through one silent, sacred question. Is this who I am now? Will this impress? Will this attract? Will this be liked? But does this reflect me? Does this protect me? Does this honor me? And that filter, used daily, quietly, consistently, creates the most powerful form of attractiveness, unshakable self-respect. Because when you respect yourself on a soul level, the world has no choice but to feel it. So here we are, after everything we've uncovered, after 11 habits, after thousands of words. Here's the truth. You don't need to become someone else. You don't need to decorate your personality. You don't need to chase attraction, like it's a prize to be won. You just need to come back to yourself. The real you. The one beneath the noise. The one beneath the layers. The one you've always been, before the world asked you to be louder, faster, flashier. Because silent attractiveness isn't something you achieve. It's something you reveal. And to reveal it, you don't need to add. You need to subtract. Strip away what's not. You strip the performance, the anxiety, the comparisons, the need to be seen, the pressure to prove, and what's left? Stillness, substance, self. Not the version of you shaped by trends, but the version shaped by truth. That version, the quietly confident one, the deeply self-respecting one, the one who radiates presence without effort, has always been there. It just needed space. It's never been about noise, not once. Real power doesn't announce itself. Real beauty doesn't beg for attention. Real strength doesn't tremble under pressure. And real connection, the kind that makes people remember you, feel safe with you, open up to you. That kind of connection is never built in volume. It's built in energy. The energy of someone who listens, who sees, who feels, who holds, not perfectly, but fully. And that fullness, that quiet, calm fullness, it's what changes rooms without needing to raise a voice. The world needs less noise, more you. Not the curated you, not the branded you, not the performative, always on, always improving version of you, just you, present, grounded, honest, still. A presence that makes people breathe deeper, not because you said the right things, but because your energy is real. We're not drawn to perfection. We're drawn to presence, to wholeness, to peace. So stop trying to be seen. Start trying to be true. Let your quiet speak. Let your posture speak. Let your choices speak. Let your peace speak. Let your boundaries speak. Let your gaze speak. Let your silence speak. Because when you cultivate this way of being, you don't walk into rooms hoping to be noticed. You walk in, and the room adjusts to your frequency. No applause, no spotlight, no performance, just presence. And that's the kind of presence that doesn't fade. It echoes. You are the message, not your words, not your image, not your feed. You, the life you build in private, the habits you honor in silence, the love you give without needing return, the self-respect you practice when no one's watching. That's what people feel. That's what makes you unforgettable. That's what creates silent attraction, not for a moment, but for a lifetime. So from now on, walk slowly, speak less, listen deeply, decide clearly, love quietly, protect your energy, and show up fully. Not to be liked, not to be chased, but to become what you were always meant to be. A presence so grounded, so real, yet so intentional that the world can't help but lean in and wonder, who is that? And the answer, someone who no longer needs to be loud to be heard.